So this month, I thought it would be fun to go back to some, I don't want to say basics because many of these things are not basic, but they are all about making us more efficient. And I've got a grab bag of, I don't know, 20 or 30 things that I'm going to be showing. And Uh, sort of each one is very, very brief, sometimes just a few moments. So, if I went too fast, don't hesitate to unmute yourself and interrupt me. This isn't like this lengthy, you know, 500 step recipe. This is more like, uh, here's, here's 20 or 30 cupcake recipes. So, we can keep it loose and, hopefully you will discover something that you didn't know was there in Vectorworks. So right now, I've what you're seeing on screen is I've got these I think it's four column objects. Go ahead and show my object info palette. Let me minimize that. So we've got these four column objects, and they're just standard plug-in objects, right? And one of the things that we like to do with columns is to line them up and space them evenly, and so on and so forth. So one of my favorite uh, all-time tools or commands in Vectorworks is the align distribute command. So you will, well, you know what? I think I need to share my full screen and not just my Vectorworks window so that you can all see my commands. So let me go ahead and do that. And that'll be better for everybody, including anyone watching this as a recording. Okay, so here we go. Here's these four columns, and I'm using a custom workspace, and I apologize in advance, but I'll try to alert you if I'm doing something that's sort of not in the usual place. But the modify menu in the standard workspaces has this align command, and there are various sub commands that go with align. There's align to grid, align distribute 3D, and align distribute linear align. So right now I'm going to talk to you about align distribute. So, I'm sure for the vast majority of you, this is something that you're very familiar with, but on the off chance that somebody watching this doesn't know about this command, it's awesome. So you've got this little uh, thumbnail sketch with a collection of objects, and it gives you a preview of what the behavior is. So the right-hand uh, series of options here is all about how things get aligned vertically or distributed vertically. And then the one on the bottom is all about how things get distributed horizontally. So you can align everything to be uh, centered, for example, and you'll see that all of those columns just center themselves. Sorry, that's the wrong keyboard shortcut. There you go. And you'll notice that when you align them to be centered, they will just find their sort of the geometric center of all the objects. So if I move this one down here and select all these and align them, oh, I selected sorry, got ahead of myself. Let me select all these. You'll see that they all align themselves that way. And of course, I can, in addition to aligning them, I can, align them top, for example, and then distribute them. So when I distribute them, I can either distribute their left edges so that they're all evenly spaced according to their left edges, or their center, or their right, or their insertion point. Now, if it's four identical objects, none of these will matter, right? You'll get the same result. But potentially, you've got objects of different sizes with different insertion points or centers. And so it might matter which of these left, center, insertion point, right, or spacing you choose for the distribution. So we'll go ahead and align these top, and you see that it finds the topmost object, the object with the largest Y value, and aligns according to that, and then distributes according to the spacing. Now, there's a couple of less obvious tricks to this. So sometimes what I'll do is if I want to um, uh, have a spacing that isn't necessarily even, but perhaps I have an A, 2A, 2A, A sort of spacing. What I'm doing here is I'm duplicating these three columns that I just selected, and now I'm going to select all those and select that. So you see I now have 7 column objects that are selected. I'll do the align distribute. And then I can go in and delete these middle columns, right? I've got one too many, I think. So let me redo that. There we go. So now I can delete. Nope, I got it. Had it right the first time. So there we go. That's what I wanted to do. There we go. So now this space is exactly half of that space is exactly equal to that space, and so forth. So you can get creative with the number of objects that you distribute so that you can get some sort of proportion or ratio that you like.
Do they have a option for doing classical Greco-Roman spacing so that if you have an even number of columns, it'll automatically make the center space slightly larger? I'm kidding.
No, but I bet there's a marionette script you could write for that.
There you go.
The um, the other cool thing with align distribute that um, may not be obvious is it's really hard to see, but so I'll highlight it over here because it doesn't, the line weight is not reflected. But here I've got a 2D locus out here,
Mhm.
right? And when you include a 2D locus in your aligned distribution, it treats the 2D locus as a kind of a fixed point. So I'm going to go ahead and
Hey,
align
Laurie,
these. Hey, I
how's it
think you have
going?
an open mic, Al. I'm going to align those bottom, right? And so
George.
what happens is, um, Al, I think you have an open mic. Thanks. Okay, so if I align
Yeah, yeah,
those
yeah.
to the
Yeah,
bottom,
yeah. I've got it. I've got his
right,
face in my David Pokeyhorn. Yeah.
there we go. Sorry about that. All right, so when I align that to the bottom, what you'll see that normally if I did an aligned bottom, you would expect that everything would align with the bottom of this circle. Um, but because one of the objects is a 2D locus, it's going to align to the bottom of the 2D locus, which of course is the same as the top, is the same as the left, is the same as the right. So the 2D locus, when it's included with an aligned distribute, always like basically doesn't get moved, and everything moves with respect to the 2D locus. So going back to my align distribute with my columns, here's a 2D locus here right at the internal origin of the file. So if I take all of these columns and I include the 2D locus, and now I align center, then all of those columns will move down and be centered horizontally with uh, the locus. And of course, a 2D locus never prints. So if you've got some spectacularly important point in your drawing file that you don't want to lose, drop a 2D locus there, lock it, and then you can use it as a reference point for all sorts of cool things.
Francois, in
Yeah.
the 2D locus, what I do when I want to see it is I just simply make a teensy little circle and put it on top of the locus and group them. Does that work? It works for me. So the 2D locus should move, the whole group moves. So a visible, printable dot shows up over the locus.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't recall. Let's give it a try. If a locus that's in a group will behave the same way with respect to a line distribute.
Oh,
I'm not sure, but hey, you know what? We can experiment.
And you also mentioned something about the insertion points of the objects, um, varying insertion points. I've never had a difficulty with objects not aligning properly. It may be coincidentally they all have the exact insertion point, but I doubt it. And if there's a way to change, I don't know how to change an insertion point on an object. Is there a way to do
Yeah.
that?
So one thing at a time.
Yeah, sorry.
Let's check the locus here and see if everything aligns center to that locus. No, once the
Nope.
locus is part of a group, it loses that sort of
Oh,
privileged sort of uh, personality. Now, with respect to the insertion point, um, a normal, we'll call it a normal object, a circle, a rectangle, a line, or whatever. Its quote insertion point is its centroid.
right.
However, there are certain things that have defined insertion points. For example, doors, windows,
Yeah.
or a symbol, right? The insertion point of a symbol may not be the center of that
Oh,
circle,
symbol, right.
right? So that's this for symbols and plugin objects, insertion point is potentially distinct from center. For other objects, you know, doesn't doesn't really matter.
Got it.
They're almost interchangeable. All right, so yeah, grouping the locus, as I suspected, doesn't sort of breaks it for align distribute purposes.
I think I realize in my case, it's usually I think of it at the last minute before I'm printing something, and then I do it. So it's probably never come up what you just did. But that's really good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, yep. Um, let's see. Moving by point. Yeah, okay. So let's say I've got this column here and it is, perfectly aligned with the corner of this rectangle, right? They're centered. And I want another column that's at the other corner of the rectangle. Obviously, I could just mirror that, right? I could just do a mirror and duplicate, find the center of the rectangle, and I'm happy. But sometimes it doesn't quite work out that way. Mirror uh, may not be an easy one to do. The whole thing may be on an angle or whatnot. So there's a move by point command, which was introduced, oh, golly, um, many revisions ago, but, um, you know, probably within the last decade or so. So if you're a long time Vectorworks user, you might have missed that this tool came along, or maybe it came along and you never really built it into your repertoire, and so you've forgotten about it. But so move by point, the typical keyboard shortcut for that is Shift M, I believe. At least that's what it is for me. And I can move according to a reference point, and I can move a set distance, or I can stretch a certain number of points. Right. This first option we'll show later when we talk about doors and windows or objects inserted in walls. But here I just want to uh, move, and I want to go ahead and um, uh, uh, duplicate. So when I click on this mode over here, the object retention mode, if I deselect that, I can just click on the top left corner and then click on the top right corner, and I've just literally moved the column. So it's gone from the original location. If I undo that, but I select this option, right here, that column will remain. And so now I'm creating a duplicate. And if I select this fifth option, having selected the fourth option, not only do I create a duplicate, but the original column is still selected, which it was not with that deselected. Now, if I want, say, 7 columns, right, you could do the trick that I was just showing you where you just like drag duplicate this thing and you make a bunch of columns, you make 7 columns, and then you align one and so on and so forth. Or you could just use this distribution mode, right, where I'm going to have 6 duplicates. That is to say, I'm going to be left with 7 columns because I have the original. And so now I just drag from this point to that point, and Vectorworks just puts in 6 new columns that are evenly distributed. So I don't know why you would, but if you're drawing a stair in section as a 2D drawing without using the stair tool, right? You could imagine where you might want to do something like this. So yeah, the move by points tool, I think, particularly with longtime users, tends to be forgotten. I think it's kind of emphasized, and new users tend to be on top of it. But I like that tool a lot. And then here's what that. Okay, you need to get off the keyboard. Talking to the cat, of course. So if I move my point by wall object, where's my? Oh, my save view is broken. Well, that's all right. We'll go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and let's draw ourselves a wall. Oh, what's going on? Maybe my classes are all turned off. Oh, there we go. Yeah, my classes were off. Here we go. That's better. All right. So the move by point tool also does really great things when you've got objects inserted in a wall. It could be doors, could be windows, could be anything, could be power outlet. So in this mode, if you click on an object that's inserted in a wall, like here it says window in wall in the object info palette, you'll see that there's a set position button. If I click on that, check out what happens. It's just activated the move by point tool, but it's activated it in this last mode where you're moving an object relative to a point of reference. So let's say I want window D over here to have its left jamb 6 inches from the inside corner of the wall, right? So, there's a tedious way I could do that. I could just draw a line. I could move it 6 inches. I could take the window. I could drag it 6 inches. I've inadvertently stretched the window because of the new interactive stretch modes that there are for windows and doors. So now I'm going to try again. Maybe I'll zoom in here with the zoom loop. It's taken me a while to do all this stuff. And then even once I've managed to move the darn thing, I'm going to have to delete this line. So set position is the way to go, hands down. There's just a little thing you have to remember. You click on set position, it automatically activates the move by point tool. And intuitively, I don't know about you, intuitively, my reaction would be to click at this rough opening on the left side, drag over here to the inside corner of the wall, and type in 6 inches. And what the heck happened? That is totally unexpected. So the reason it works this way is you've got to be careful about the order of operations. When you set position, the first point that you click is not a point on the object you want to move, but the first point you click is the reference point. Okay, so first I want to click here at the inside corner of the wall. Then I want to click to the jamb. It tells me what the current distance is. I could just subtract a foot, for example, and move it over a foot, or I could just type in the value that I want. In this case, 6 inches. Boom. And if you don't believe me, because I know you're a skeptic at heart, it is in fact 6 inches.
So Francois, when you tried to do that other one, you basically, what that command is, you moved it 6 inches positively. Because I use that command, but I have to do some math to get to where I want it to go.
Yeah, if I want to
put in negative 3 feet, whatever. Yeah, but this is much better.
Yeah, if I want to move it 6 inches, it's real easy. I just do a command M and then I move it 6 inches.
Well, there's that too, yeah. What was the one you tried before though to move it and it didn't work?
I deliberately did set position in the wrong order. I measured from the jam to the wall corner instead of
I see.
the wall corner to the jam. And it didn't move it 6 inches. It
Oh, that's
moved it
weird.
way more.
Yeah.
All right. So that's the key. Use set position a lot. It is a massive time saver. But remember, click on the reference point first and the window or door or whatever second. Okay. What is going on? There we go. All right. Duplicate along path. Not one I necessarily have a lot of um, call for necessarily, but boy, when you need it, it's really handy. So here I've just drawn an arc, and I have a column because I just had this column laying around, and so now I have to remember where duplicate along path is for me. I think it's right here. Duplicate along path. I've got it tucked away behind my mirror and my move by points command, but it's probably in a different spot in your workspace, right? And so you've got a couple of options. You can click on a path. Um, so, um, or you can create a path. So I'm going to go ahead and click on a path. Oh, and then I can also do either a fixed distance or a number of duplicates. The start offset can be the next click, or it can be some set distance. Probably easier if I just demonstrate that. Let's go ahead and do 5 duplicates, right? So I've got my object, and I'll just click on the path. And you can see that it evenly spaced those columns, and it made them tangents, right? Because that's my option here. If I let me select this again and do duplicate along path and deselect tangent, you'll see it distributed them evenly in 1/4 increments on the arc, but it didn't rotate them, right? For some reason, if I want to do an arc, it drops off the last one. So you'll need to rectify that. If I go ahead and duplicate along path and do it on a straight line, you can see that it rotates the object to be equal to the angle of the line that I've drawn. And it does, in fact, add one at the end, which it doesn't on an arc or a polyline. And I confess I don't really know why. So for kind of mundane distributions, duplicate along path is probably more overhead than you really need. But there are times like, for example, if I did want to array these columns on this arc, drawing a bunch of lines or measuring the radius of the arc or the sweep here, it's 93.64, right? So dividing that by 5 and then doing a bunch of math or whatever could be like a bit of a hassle. So it's not, frankly, a command that I use a lot of, but when you need it, it's a big help.
That's why I'm sorry to interrupt again. When you're doing a distribute along the curved path, is there a way to have the columns be, aligned with the path so they're perpendicular to the radius, like you did with a straight line? Because when you did it before, all the columns were orthogonal, and it looked weird that way. If you have a
No, they weren't. No. The first time I did it, they were not. So again, choose tangent to path.
uh-huh.
Boom.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So how did you change it?
I deselected tangent to path.
Tangent path. Got it. Thank you.
Yep. Yep. And uh, I don't know, if I rotate my column 90 degrees, it's always a, agonizing debate. Do I want to see the web or do I want to see the flange on my columns? Um, if I tangent to path and then it, rotates them that way. All right. Well, this one's really basic. Uh, again, most of these things are quite simple if you don't know that they're there. So if you hold down the Option key, then you can drag and duplicate something. So obviously, if I just grab that and drag it, great, I've just dragged it. But if I hold down the Option key and I drag it and duplicate it, then it's kind of like a duplicate and a drag all in one. So that's actually one I use fair amount. Now it's not a controlled drag, right? So it's not a move by points. It's a somewhat arbitrary sort of drag, but um, uh, but there you go, holding down the Option key. I guess that's what would that be on a PC? Somebody on a PC pipe in. Control. I don't know. Okay. Must be a lot of Mac people today. There's also, under the modify command, there's a bunch of drafting aids. I don't know if you've ever noticed those: arc into segments, line into segments, even divide, and so forth. So here we are back to our arc. So I can select that and then say, turn that into segments. We'll do 7 segments. I could do a number of segments or break up the segments into a given length. I could draw a polygon. I could draw lines. I'll go ahead and draw a polygon. And so now it's created a polygon that follows that arc, but just as a series of straight line segments. And it's non-destructive. I can do an even number of divisions, say 7 divisions, and retain the original object so that it's not destroyed. And now I have 7 even arcs. If I drag those away, you can see the original is still there. And so forth, right? So I could create dividing lines. What happened there? Let's create dividing lines. There we go. That didn't create them. All right, well, what happened there? Interesting. So that's a nice, often neglected set of commands. Here I've got an old PDF I pulled down a couple of years ago. By default, snap to geometry now in Vectorworks is selected, but didn't used to be. And of course, if you've got an object that is or a PDF and snap to geometry is deselected, you could always select it. Now, keep in mind that the PDF has to have been created by some sort of a vector-based program to be able to snap to the geometry. If it's just a pixelated PDF, then you could snap to geometry all day long. You won't get anything. So in this case, what I can do is because this product has a dimension, I can just click on the PDF page and I can modify scale objects and scale by distance. So I'll just use the measuring tool here and measure from endpoint to endpoint. And it's actually scaling at 1'10". And so I'll change that to 27 inches. And now it has scaled that object the way I like it, so that it's the real world size. Got to be careful. Sometimes PDFs are not actually drawn to scale. So, it's a little bit off. And then the other thing is if I double click on it, you'll see now it says edit or exit PDF crop here. So I can draw a single shape like a rectangle. These are my clearances and I'll exit that. And so now it has cropped that PDF. So, I could use that for an interior elevation or, trace over it to build a symbol. Whatever
Francois,
works for me.
would you mind doing that again? Just how the crop was done?
Yeah. So here's a PDF.
Yep.
I just double click on it
Yeah.
and I get the wide orange band here around my
I see.
screen and it
Yeah.
says
Yeah.
edit PDF crop.
Oh, I
And then I
see.
can
Mhm.
I can draw whatever I want,
Yeah. I couldn't see the word crop because Hamid's picture is in the way.
Oh, well, you could just
Move your window.
minimize the little window there.
Yes, I know. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you
there
for
you
that.
go. And so now, the crop can be anything, but
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
only have one crop,
Right.
like
Francois,
any other crop. Yeah,
is the rest of the PDF still there, or is it?
it is. Yep, still there. So I can just duplicate that, delete the crop, zoom in here. Draw a new crop. There it is. Maybe, I don't know why I would want this drawing, but, maybe I do. So now I basically have two copies of the same. I'm sorry?
Vectorworks is over.
Okay. Then maybe that wasn't for me. Oh, yeah.
Is over.
Here's a series of lines and arcs and polylines, right? Maybe I just drew all of those. And so I'm just going to select this one and under modify. Sorry, I think it's under edit actually. I use this all day long. Yeah, edit. Select connected objects. So when you select connected objects, pretty self-explanatory. That's what it does. Any object that is touching the endpoint of this polyline is going to get selected. I think somewhere along the line, I'm going to talk about the workspace tool, but you can see that I've modified my contextual workspace to add select connected objects to it. If I have a little gap, or a big gap, right? Obviously, if I select connected objects, it only selects things that are connected to it. Sometimes the gap is, teensy tiny. And maybe I moved it. Well, here I've got a continuous path, right? So if you've got a bunch of objects and they're not actually connected, select connected objects will tell you that because it'll just stop at a certain point. So sometimes when you're cleaning up a drawing that you imported or something like that, you might need to hunt down all these little gaps and reconnect them.
Isn't there a tool to select that whole object and just say connect all the objects globally?
No, there is a.
I think he's talking about compose.
Yeah,
Compose.
yeah. You can select connected objects and then compose, which turns those into a polyline. Notice that it is not closed, and that's because, I deliberately broke it. So if I close it, it'll add that little point there. And then maybe I just double click on this and subtract this. There we go.
Yeah, I forgot there was a close command on the info palette. That's it.
Correct. Yep. Select similar is the magic wand tool, informally known as. And so if I look at the preferences, right, I can say select everything that is the same object type. And so now I'll click and it'll select all the rectangles, but it doesn't select the circles. Or if I go to my settings, I can deselect object type and select everything by pen attributes. And so now it'll select everything that is a dashed red line, whether it's a rectangle or a circle or whatnot. So that's really useful, but where it gets especially useful is when you have some settings. So I often want to select things by class and type. So select all the rectangles that are in a plumbing class or whatever, or select all the arcs that are in an electrical switch class. Or I could select any number of things, and then what I may want to do is go ahead and once I've created a set of selections, go ahead and save it. So select by pen. And so now I can select, what happened? Didn't I say that? I did. Then why isn't it showing up here? That's weird. Very interesting. Okay, well, it should be up there, but it's not. Interesting. Let's rename that. Oh. All right, I'm going to follow that button. So yeah, so I may select all this, everything by symbol, right? So if, I've got a lighting plan and I just want to select all the identical pendant symbols in my lighting plan, or by wall style, and layer, so that I can grab all the masonry veneer walls on my ground floor layer and whatnot. But what makes this tool especially useful is when you create these settings, sort of presets. There's also a command that is similar to the select similar tool, which is custom selection. So that's kind of a command version of that tool, and you can create a script as well. The difference being that the custom selection command operates logically, so it'll select things even on layers that you can't see, whereas the select similar tool requires that you click on an object that is visible. So that's the primary difference. Sorry, Bill, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just saying, is this select on the select similar preferences, the line end marker, is that been added in fairly recently? I don't remember that. It's in the yeah, it's bottom corner. And if
Line
so,
end marker. I
yeah, so let's say I
don't
select
remember.
all these big dots and I want to make them smaller, so I can easily hit the big dot and select them all. And then how would I change it?
From the attributes palette.
Oh, right. Thank you.
Yep.
And then Francois, with the magic wand tool, that generally operates on the active layer.
Uh,
No, it'll select everything. You just may not know it.
So it will select everything globally throughout your whole file.
I think
I
so.
okay, and I guess there is a thing where it says other attributes, and you could put layer on the other attributes as well, right under the word
Yeah,
class.
correct. You could
Okay.
select it only by layer. So
Yeah.
for
Okay.
example, I have a preset for wall style and layers. So sometimes I'm in a 3D model
Yeah.
view. I've got multiple building layers. I only want
Yeah.
to grab my ground floor walls. That same style may be used on other layers. And so that's why I have that preset.
Got it. Cool.
Yep,
Thank you.
you betcha. So in some ways similar to the select similar tool is the eyedropper tool, which I really love. Um, there's all sorts of attributes that you can pick up with the eyedropper tool. So I can pick up the attributes of this circle, for example, and then holding down the option key, I get the paint bucket mode. When I am near an object that is legal to put down its attributes, I can click on that. And so now I've assigned the same class and pen weight and so forth. But if, for example, I change the class of the object right here, class, but I don't change the line marker, right? Then I can pick that up and put it down here. In this case, it went ahead and it changed the line weight as well because I've got those attributes set by class. So even though I didn't have uh, the line, oh, where was it? I was looking at line end marker, pen attributes. So let's deselect that. Let's undo that. Yeah, pen attributes, great. Let's see how that works. Yeah. So again, it's because it's in my pen 0.30 class and the line weight, pen color, fill, all that is by class, then it went ahead and changed the line weight of this rectangle by virtue of changing the class. But you can pick up all sorts of attributes, viewport styles. Like if you, now we have actual viewport styles, but if you have a viewport and you like, you meticulously or tediously, as the case may be, fine tune what classes are turned on in a particular viewport, and you just want to clone that, you can use the eyedropper tool to do that. So huge time saver. Obviously, let's go back to yeah. So now, the eyedropper tool also works on windows and doors. So for example, I can pick up this window attribute and put it down on that window. And now that becomes a window D and it has all the same parameters as the original, its size and so forth. And that only is the case if you have plugin parameters selected as the other attributes that you turn on. And like with the select similar tool, you can go ahead and create a bunch of preset settings for the eyedropper and save them if you so desire.
And I'm sorry to have missed it, Francois, but can you just speak again about the plugin parameters? Just what was that? That was a detail that slipped right past me.
So plugin parameters would be everything pertaining to that window. So its style, its width, its height, its elevation above either the layer 0 or the head or the sill, whether it's a casement, whether it's a double hung, everything having to
Got
do
it.
with the window parameters, it just clones that plugin object. Obviously, if you pick up the parameters on a window and you put them down on a door, it's not going to turn the door into a window. So those only work on like settings.
Still pretty powerful if you want to say do an iteration of a design where you're making all the windows alike, for instance.
Right. Or you have a window that you want to change to, right.
Yeah.
Make it like
Okay.
another window, and you
Yeah,
just clone it. And you don't have to like either hand modify it or drag a copy of the other window and replace it. So
cool. Now you're getting ready to talk about my topic. Thank you.
yeah, so snaps have now in 2024 been moved to the upper right of the toolbar right up here. And that is those snaps can't be reordered, or this is the order that they come in. You can't put them in a floating palette and so on and so forth. So there are times when you want to snap to things, almost always, but sometimes you don't want to snap to things, particularly I find if I'm drawing a polygon and I want something that's a little more freehandy, actually I want to get close to this corner, but I don't want to be right on it, right? I can either zoom in, but there are times when it's appropriate to just turn off your snaps. So there's a couple of ways of doing that. There is a pause button over here, right there. So you click on that and you can see that it has suspended all of your snaps, and then it brings them back to whichever ones were selected when you suspended are once again selected. The other thing that you can do is you can hold down the tilde key, which is in the upper left corner of your QWERTY keyboard, right? If you hold down the tilde key, you can see, which I'm holding down now, you can see that it's also suspending the snaps. And now I can get nice and close to these corners and not snap to them. And then I can let go of that tilde key, and now I can snap to that polygon and do something like that, for example. So knowing that you can suspend your snap, sometimes you might hit the tilde key inadvertently, and normally it boomerangs back when you let go of the tilde key, so that's unlikely, but it's possible to click here. If you hold down the tilde key and let go, the snaps are only suspended while you're holding down the tilde key. But if you click up here, then the snaps are suspended until you click again. So tapping the tilde key when you've clicked on the pause button does not unpause the snaps. So just be aware of that. If your snaps aren't working, check to make sure that you haven't inadvertently paused them.
And Francois, are these the selections you normally make in the snap palette?
Yep, those are my standards.
Cool, thank you.
Smart edges, intersects, angle snaps, object snaps, no grid.
And can you tell us very quickly what is a smart edge versus a regular edge?
Sure. So here's a rectangle. Here's another rectangle. If I want to draw a circle whose center is at the vertical extension of that right edge of that rectangle, and whose center is also at the horizontal extension of the top edge here, then I'm getting these red lines, and I'm getting this smart edge to smart edge. And now I know that that circle center is dead on with the left edge of the top rectangle and the top edge of the right-hand rectangle. So that's what
couldn't be more clear now that you've explained it. Thank you.
Yep. And then if you have this last option, so that's your smart points. Your smart edge is very similar, but it works on any edge, not just an orthogonal one. So if I draw this rectangle and I draw that rectangle, right, I can draw a circle whose center, by virtue of using this edge, I just hover over this edge and I get that red line, and then I hover over that edge. I'm not clicking on anything. Sometimes it's a little stubborn and it doesn't want to get highlighted. Be patient. And then now I've got the intersection of those non-orthogonal edges to draw the center of my circle. You also saw I got a little bisector there. I have a meeting in 33 minutes, so I got to keep pushing forward. Oh, yeah, here's a good one. If your dimensions are associative, so I don't know if you can see this, zooming in isn't going to really help, but there's a little green box at the end point of that dimension string. And there's a little green box here. It's barely visible. If you were on your computer, you'd see it much more clearly than you would on Zoom. The way you get that is through your document preferences. Under dimensions, you associate dimensions. Okay. So I'll go ahead and delete that, and I'll just draw an associated dimension. So I'll click from here to there. And you can see, maybe you can see that you've got these little tiny, faint green squares at each of those points. So with the dimensions associated, I can double click on the dimension and I can type, say, 4.5 inches, and you can see that the door has moved. So it's kind of like the move by point tool or the set distance tool, only you're using a dimension string to actually drive the geometry. But that only works if the dimension is associated.
So the dimension is associated, and then when it's associated, you just double click and you can change the number. That's it.
Well, whether the dimension is associated or not, I can double click and change the dimension, right? So I can double click on this 3'2" or 3'1.95", whatever. I get 3 points.
Yeah.
I choose which one is fixed. So I'll choose the center line and make that 24 inches. And now it's 24. So that's all dimensions behave that way. But if they're associated and you dimension some actual geometry, then you can use the dimension string to drive the geometry.
And tell me again, where's the association button?
In the document preferences.
Oh, got it. Okay, good. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. And that is all stuff I didn't know about. Thank you for telling us.
And if you delete the object that it's associated with, it goes away. If you want to disassociate a dimension, really the easiest way to do that is to cut and paste in place. And now it's no longer associated. Right. All right. Oh, so here's a great one. Here's a building. And do I talk about help? I don't think so. So on a Mac, and this isn't true of Vectorworks, this is any Mac application. If you go to the help menu, there's a search field, and you can start typing in that search field. And it will find any commands in the application that you're in that correspond to the terms of that search field, if you knew that. So I'm thinking, boy, wouldn't it be cool if there were commands in Vectorworks that had something to do with dimension. So I'm just going to go on a fishing expedition. And I start typing dimension. And hey, look, I've got dimension exterior wall. Let's do that. So I get this dialog box. It asks me which layer I want to dimension. It has all of these parameters that you see. It allows me to select whether the dimensions are ignored I ignore any dimension that's less than, say, 1/2 inch or 1 inch, or draw them in red or whatever. And this dimension exterior walls command does exactly what it says. it dimensions exterior walls. So it's going to ignore any interior walls. It's just going to focus on walls that form a closed perimeter to your network of walls, aka building. So you can see I've got a building overalls at 4'6" from the wall, and the walls and their joints at 3 feet, and doors and windows at 18 inches. So I'll hit OK. Bang. They're all my dimensions. Now, they're not perfect, right? What I tend to find is that I will need to clean these up, but it's, and then it'll give me sometimes it'll give me these funny little results. So what I found in past versions of Vectorworks, and frankly, I don't know whether that's true anymore, so let's go ahead and experiment, is it's probably a good idea for me to turn off all the components other than the structural core of the wall. So let's just go ahead and turn those off. That looks a little cleaner. And let's see what happens when we do that again. About the same. So again, not perfect, but a really big time saver, particularly if you have a nice complex building. And then maybe you go in and you just clean those up. So, and it works in the annotation space for a layer, right? So you don't need to do it just on the design layer itself. You can do it in the annotation.
Exterior wall.
Exterior walls only.
Where did you choose exterior versus interior walls in that?
I didn't. These walls are bounded by other walls, so it just ignores them. It's just their it's just their spatial relationship, which Vectorworks interprets as an interior versus an exterior wall.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, the snap loop, pretty self-explanatory. Let's go back to our wall dimensions. Right, sometimes I may need to zoom in, but if I don't want to zoom in, I just hold down the Z key and it gives me this little snap loop. So let's go ahead and activate a dimension string. And now when I click inside the snap loop goes away. And then I hit the Z key again and I'm snap looping again. And so now I can make that dimension like so. So sometimes that's a little faster than zooming in, zooming out. I'll just hover over someplace and hit the snap loop. Keep in mind, as soon as you do an operation like click, the snap loop goes away. So then you'll need to hit this over here to snap loop again. Very useful. Z key. Yeah. Find replace text. Really useful command. It's right under the text menu as you would expect. And it'll ask me what text to find. I can replace all globally. I can just replace text objects or record fields or worksheets or all the above, all layers, active layer only, case sensitive, right? All these options, fairly self-explanatory. What I will say is it's sometimes useful to just go into your text block and highlight the text that you want, but go ahead and highlight a little bit more and a little bit after. So I've selected these words here. I hit copy. Now, find replace text, select all, everywhere, all layers. I'll hit paste here, and then I'll tab to go to the next field, hit paste again, and then I'll change the 30 pounds. Why am I doing that? Well, if I just changed 15 to 30 everywhere in my drawing, that might create some unintended consequences, right? There might be some things that I want to be 15 whatever and not change to 30 whatever. So by grabbing a little bit of extra text before and after the part that I want to change, I'm hopefully insulating myself against making changes that I don't really want to make. And sometimes I might, just grab the whole note and just change it globally. Now, obviously, if you're not just using text blocks for your notes, but you're using the call out tool with a call out database, then you can just change the call out database and your notes database, and then that change is made globally. But that's not always the case. So be aware that that's there. Oh yeah, delete key cancel. I don't really have anything for that. All right, so sometimes I've got the polygon tool here. I'm just going to start drawing a polygon, and maybe I'm tracing something and it's really lengthy and it's going on, and I screw up. And I'm like, oh man, I didn't mean to do that. Well, I've got a couple of options. One is I could just keep going and come back and fix it later. The other thing I can do is, I think it's the escape key. No, that's not it. What is it? It's the delete key. That's it. Let's do that again. Oh, where's my delete key? Here it is. So if I hit the delete key, you see it went back one click. I hit the delete key, it's going back one click. So I'm just going back and, deleting as I go along to finish whatever, shape I want to make. So useful to know, as you're drawing a multi-point or a path object, the delete key, whether it's walls or whatever, will go back one step. Oftentimes I want to know where something is in the resource manager, so I can right click on it. And you see that when I do that, where is it? Seeing it, I know it's there.
What are you looking for, Francois?
Is it properties at the bottom?
No.
What are you looking for, please?
I'm looking to show it in the resource manager.
Ah,
It'll be a reveal or a, unless I took that out, I don't know why I would have done such a thing. It's weird.
Is it in the object info palette?
Shouldn't be. Oh, here it is. So locate wall style in resource manager is right there. And for some reason, it's not giving me that for the door. Oh, well, I know why, because it's not a styled door. If it were a styled door, it would show that to me. So this is a styled wall, and so it does exist in the resource manager. So here's the locate wall style in resource manager, and it immediately opens the resource manager and it highlights that wall. So helpful.
that's pretty huge. I did not know that. Thank you.
And that'll work for, textures or symbols, anything that lives in the resource manager, you can use that to do that.
And what palette is that found in?
It's not, it's a context menu. So you right click on a selected object.
Got it. Ooh, nice. Thank you.
Boy, I was going to spend some time on 2D graphics, but I just don't think I have time to go through all of this. So this is going to be super quick. So a couple of things. One is be aware that for shapes like rectangles, polygons, circles, whatever, you can apply a different fill opacity than a line opacity. So here I've got this green rectangle, and it's at what looks like 30% opacity. And then I've got this one, and it's at 30% opacity. And because they're superimposed over each other, where they overlap, I get 60% opacity. But notice that the line weight itself is fully opaque. So those can be independently controlled. And then gradients, this is a gradient I use an awful lot for as a quick rendering style. And I think I talked about that in a previous meeting. So we can go ahead and let's see if I can locate gradient and resource manager. Hey, look, there it is. So that's my little watercolor sky. So I apply a yellow at one end and a kind of a periwinkle or a sky blue, whatever, at the other end. And then this slider moves like where the transition occurs from the blue to the yellow, right? And then I can use the attribute mapping tool, which is option A, to define the endpoints of that gradient. And I can take that rectangle and put it behind a rendering, and it looks like a little, kind of an old-timey watercolor sky technique, very, very basic. I can also use images for fills, or, here's a sort of a marble for countertops or whatever. And I can scale that again with the object info, with the attributes, the attributes mapping tool, or directly from the object info, or I'm sorry, the attributes palette, and I can define how that scales. So image fills they're 2D only, right? They're not textures.
And so the attributes, that palette that you got where you stretched, is that a right click proposition?
No, that's option A. That's the mapping tool.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. There it is. It's my attribute mapping tool right there.
Cool. Thank you.
And then we've got a variety of tiles here that actually, I think Sherry, who's on this call, built all these tiles. They're really quite beautiful. If we right click and show that tile, right click and locate the tile in the resource manager, you can see there's a tile resource. Let's go ahead and edit that. We can either edit the geometry or the settings. Let's edit the geometry. And so you can see that these are just polylines with just a fill and a line weight. And so this pattern was drawn, and then over here, these ghosty ones, that defines how it repeats, right? So if you wanted to show a little bit of a grout line, you could sort of play with that, like move this one up and move this one out, right? Not that I recommend that you do that, but these are the repetitions that define how frequently that tiling pattern occurs. And there you have it. So you can do all sorts of wonderful things with tiles, like, these kinds of tile patterns or offset, far more versatile than hatches. The only thing that a tile can't do that a hatch can do is show up as a surface hatch on a 3D object, like as a substitute for a texture in a hidden line mode for a while. And then we could spend all sorts of time talking about the hatch editor that I don't think we have time for, but I will say that, one of the things to keep in mind is that there are a lot of hatches floating around out there. And if you can get a hold of a hatch that is inside a DWG file, you can just import the DWG and hoover up the hatches and edit them to your content. And then, of course, Vectorworks comes with a pretty huge library of hatches to begin with. So, between gradients and opacity and images and tiles and hatches, you have a lot of options for how you can work on your 2D graphics. Also, here's some line styles, right, where you can define the spacing as a style. You can create your own even line style here for clouds. So we use that for revision clouds, but we also use it as the profile for a stucco detail to show it kind of coarse and granular. And you can have those as to include text with your line styles. And the ones that are in green are designed to scale. So here's all these in green will scale. And then the ones that are in black in the resource manager will appear the same size regardless of the scale of the drawing. So in this case, if I edit that overhead electric style, edit that line style and go to the geometry, you can see that it's kind of like a tile pattern. It's a line and a piece of text. I made that text say 12 point, but I could make it 8 point. And then it'll be 8 point regardless of whether I'm drawing that overhead line on a, on a 1 inch equals 10 foot or 1 inch equals 20 foot or 1 inch equals 50 foot site plan. Speaking of connecting things, right? So here I've got a line. So revisiting that, I want to go ahead and select connected objects. And then I will go ahead and modify and compose that, just like Bill mentioned. But then once I have an object like that, keep in mind that generally in the AEC menu, you've got create objects from shapes. So in this case, property line. And so now I've got this property line that was created from that polygon, which I sometimes find to be an easier way to do that than to use the property line tool. Keep in mind, if you're going to use a azimuth or a bearing, or even azimuth for that matter, you want to go ahead and create your property line with north up so that it gives you correct north, south, east, west, and then rotate it if you need to rotate it, not the other way around. Don't, because then all your bearings obviously will be wrong. A lot of tools will have different modes. So let me just draw a quick something. I'll take these two and add those together, right? So if I double click on that, I get the reshape tool, which is what I'm showing over here. So I can reshape a point or an edge. I can move edges in preserved areas. That's new. I can change the point from vertex type, add a point, subtract a point, all that, right? So I can just click through those, or I can use the U key. Excuse me. If I just tap the U key without any modifiers, it cycles through those points. And then if I'm changing a point or adding a point, then the kind of point that I change or add is important. So then the next key over on your keyboard is the I key. So hitting the I key will toggle through that. And then the next key after the I key is the O key, right? So as you're moving from the U key, marching your way right across the keyboard, you can use the O, and then perhaps the P key will get you right to the fillet settings instead of having to click on that. And then sometimes there's even a fifth or a sixth mode, and then the left and the right bracket will control those. So just be aware that you can use that UIOP left right bracket to toggle through these different tool modes where they're applicable. And if you feel you absolutely must edit those in the workspace editor, you go down to your keys, and this is where you would modify that, but I wouldn't, but you may want to. So those are a big time saver so that you're not constantly dragging up to the view bar and manually changing those. You can just do it with a quick keyboard shortcut. Here's just probably just a SketchUp model that I imported into Vectorworks and then did a convert to line. So this is just a series of lines, right? But I may want to draw an outline around this graphic. And doing so by hand is quite tedious. So in the polygon tool, there is a lasso mode, which is this one over here. And so I can just draw a generous area around this drawing here and let go. And when I let go, it will find, provided that it's an unbroken path, it will find the outline and trace it for me. Another option would be to, that you might think would be to right click and select connected and then compose. But when I do that, I get this kind of mess, right? So that's not really quite the same thing. And then there's also a paint bucket mode to the polygon tool. So that just finds an area and fills it. And if you can't see, but I'm holding down the shift key. So if I keep the shift key held down, it will add any new polygons to that existing selection. I could make that red, for example. Something like that. So, and that's just a that's just a single contiguous poly. Keep in mind that there's this shape reshaped by midpoint. So if I do that and I drag by the midpoint here, it will keep everything parallel to that. And that's different from this mode over here, where if I grab that, you can see I can sort of stretch it in every sort of direction. But in this mode, the adjacent edges are not changed. So that can be useful sometimes. Oh yeah, this is a fun one. Here's a viewport. I'll go ahead and render that. You're probably aware that you can split objects either by point, right? So I can take this line and split it by clicking on it, or by dragging a line, I can split it that way, right? But what you may not know is that you can also split viewports by line. So I'll go ahead and split that viewport by line this way. And then I'll split it that way. And that's good enough. So now it looks like I have one viewport, but I actually have three different ones. So I'll make this one instead of, actually I have four different ones. Instead of shaded, I'll make that one wireframe. And instead of shaded, I'll make this one hidden line and update that. Right. So by splitting up these viewports, I can, develop some kind of nice rendering techniques that can be kind of fun. So a quick way to do that, or if you have a really, really massive rendering and really you should probably offload it to the cloud, but if you don't want to, or you can't for some reason, you can take your large viewport and divvy it up into 3 or 4 or 5 or 12, whatever, and then just render each viewport in turn if you're finding that you're having difficulty with your machine kind of slogging through all of that. There's a context menu that I've already used. All right, so if you just click on empty space and right click, you can get all of these commands, right? If you click on an object and right click, you get a different series of commands that are relevant to the object itself. That's how we located the resource. And then you can go ahead and go to your workspace editor. And in your workspace editor, you can add commands that you use a lot to particularly to either of those, either the document context menu or the object context menu. So, create objects from shapes, for example, or select connected objects, or locate attribute. There are some that are already built in, but you can customize that there.
And where's the workspace editor, Francois?
Under Tools, Workspaces, Edit Current Workspace.
Cool, thank you.
Or you can just go to the Help menu and type Work, and you'll find everything pertaining to workspaces.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see, what else do I want to talk about, given that I'm almost out of time.
Francois, can you do the viewport override?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good one. All right, so here I've got two identical viewports. In this case, I want my rafters to show dashed. So if you go to the classes menu here, I've got all sorts of framing classes, or maybe it's a roof member class, or maybe it's a beam class. I frankly don't remember. It's one of those, right?
Yeah.
Over here, I go to the classes menu, and where's the beam class? Whoops. Yeah, you can see that the structural beam wood class, it's got this slightly different icon. If you double click on it, I made it no fill with a dashed line. And so that overrides that for that viewport only. If I double click on this viewport and navigate to the design layer, which this is the design layer it's on, there they are, right? If I double click on this viewport and navigate to the design layer, they're back in there, right? So I'm not changing the class attributes for the whole file. I'm just changing the class attributes for that viewport and that viewport only. And of course, you can now save viewport styles. So you could have a styled viewport for RCPs that would, override things. I'm terribly sorry. I have another meeting I have to run to. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to get through absolutely everything, but I will post this on the YouTube channel, and we'll look forward to seeing you all next time, where I hope we'll be talking about GIS with some deal of detail. Gotta go. See y'all later.
Thanks very much, Francois.
All right.